versuch mal, guck mal, ob was funktioniert.
Okay, ich gehe jetzt ins Neue rein.
Mhm. Okay. Okay, so finally the stream is going. Sadly, we're still missing everyone from the stream before because we had to restart it twice.
Ja, jetzt sehe ich dich.
So everything is working. I'm gonna wait for 2 minutes to get everyone in here. Okay, we're going to start the stream shortly. In a second, there is going to be everyone here, and then we're going to start with the transmission. Just as an information for everyone coming in, we will start the stream shortly. We're just waiting for everyone to find the right link. The last link to the stream that you had been given did for some reason not work, so we're starting it here. We're going live in a few minutes, and we're going to start a few minutes late, but it's not going to be a problem prolonging the stream for a few minutes afterwards. So this is not going to be 10:30 to 12. This is probably going to be like 10:50 to 12:20 by now. I'm just getting the information if everyone is switching from the other stream, so please give me a minute and then we're going to start. Ich habe halt einfach keine Zuschauer, es kommt niemand rein.
Echt?
Es sind 3 Leute drin.
Unsere Teilnehmende?
Das sind du, ich und noch jemand.
Ich gucke nochmal, ob ich noch in den alten Link rein kann, aber ich habe es auf jeden Fall gepostet.
Also es stehen jetzt mittlerweile 10 Wiedergaben, als ob Leute halt reinkommen, aber ich sehe keine Leute drin. Ist auch egal, ich werde jetzt einfach starten. Es sind jetzt nur noch 2 drin, jetzt habe ich schon eine Person verloren. Okay, I'm gonna start with the stream just to commence with it and not delay it any further. And yeah, we're gonna start with the stream now. I see people coming in. I'm gonna say hello, and so sorry for the delay. We had a little bit of a technical issue with the stream that was already set up and had to start a secondary stream now. So I'm gonna start the stream. I hope that everyone who's coming in the next minutes will be able to join without a problem. Yeah. Okay, so then hello, welcome to our live talk on the new live program 2021 to 2027. We are delayed by 20 minutes. We're gonna have the 20 minutes at the end for the Q&A, do not worry. This live stream is gonna be 1 hour of just me introducing the new live program to you, and then another half hour, 20 minutes, depending on how much you wanna ask, of Q&A session at the very end. This event is sponsored and promoted by Profund, a cluster for European fundraising training, which our organization, EUFRAK-EuroConsults, is a part of. This cluster is a product of our EU-funded project EU Learning, which concluded last year. This is an exclusive cluster of organizations and individuals who are offering training in the field of EU funding and EU project management. Profund serves as a platform for exchanging knowledge about educational topics in the field of European funding and European project management, aimed at creating new joint training offers for sharing information on funding possibilities and much more. During the next years, this network of experts like myself and our organizations and expert institutions also aims to develop and establish European standards for the sector of adult education and training on EU funding and EU project management. We had our first live event in June for the kickoff of the cluster. With this second event now, we're starting the information series on the new funding programs. Every 3 months, a live event will take place on a particular funding program, always hosted by a different cluster member. This time, it is our organization, EUFRAK-EuroConsults. We're always interested in welcoming new members to this cluster, so if you're interested or have any further questions on the process or the cluster itself, feel free to contact me or our representative, Tamara Hinz. You will find her information on our website. Before I introduce Tamara or Profund any longer, let's get to the webinar today. My name is Maximilian Weinhold. I'm the funding expert and consultant for all questions related to the new funding period here at EUFRAK-EuroConsults. I'm also the consultant for everything concerning action programs, external cooperation and finance. Today we're going to talk about the live program, and before we start with the live program itself and talk about the different options that you have in this program, I would like to see who is in the chat right now, what kind of people we have at this live streaming event, and therefore I would like you to follow the Mentimeter link that I posted in the chat right now, which will lead us here. If you can't follow the link or you don't want to follow the link, you can also go to menti.com and use the code that is displayed here at the very top. Just as a quick starter, this is 2 questions to make sure that we understand who is here, who's participating, what kind of expectations do you have. So first question, what do you expect the live program 2021-2027 to fund? Just what's your opinion? Who do you think this is designed for? What's your expectations what this program will do in the next 7 years? And then we have a second question, what kind of experience you already have with live funding. So just show us if you have already applied for live funding, maybe unsuccessfully, maybe successfully and already managed a live funded project, or maybe you have no experience with the program so far. So I'm gonna be jumping back and forth. I already saw that the first person already answered our Mentimeter question, number 1. I'm looking forward to a few more answers here and there. Okay, I'm seeing the first answers coming in. That's nice. So what do we expect the LIFE program 2021-2027 to fund? I see climate protection, of course, an important topic of every environmental related program, but also Agenda 2030 goals, of course, the agenda that is supposed to set Europe on the path of clean new energy, of decarbonization, and so on. I see wildlife project and applied science. Very interesting. Wildlife, definitely an important topic. By now, a lot of the European funded programs have a strong focus on development of new innovations and research and these kind of things. Life definitely has something in the works here for you for wildlife projects. New interesting projects in the field of environmental protection and innovation, definitely that is absolutely core of what LIFE does. Let's continue on. Let's see who else has submitted an answer. I see climate/environmental action. Yeah, definitely, absolutely. We're going to see what the program has in store for us there. I'm going to jump to the other one just to see. Only one person has answered so far, so the few people that have answered in the very first category would be nice if you could also answer the second question, just so that we get an idea how much experience you have with the LIFE program so far. Okay, and the answers are coming in, and so far it's all no experience, none so far. For everyone else who's joining us right now, please go to menti.com and use the code displayed up here to be able to participate in our little questionnaire in the beginning, or use the link that I posted in chat. I'm going to post it one more time right now. Okay, there's already one person that has managed a LIFE funded project here, so we definitely have also some expert opinion maybe in the chat. Concerning that, if you have any questions to me, please write them in the chat in the Q&A at the end. I will be able to answer some of your questions. Maybe I'll even be able to respond to some of them during the webinar itself. If you feel like I haven't answered your question, you can post it again, but please refrain from spamming the question if I'm not able to answer it within a 5-minute span. That would be lovely. Okay, then yeah, so most of the people here have no experience with the LIFE program. Then I would say we commence on and see what the program has in store for all of us this year. LIFE is the EU funding program for environment, nature conservation and climate policy. Has by now financed over 4,000 projects across Europe since 1992, so it is in place for roughly 30 years by now. It was endowed with a total budget of roughly 3.4 billion euros for the financial period 2014 to 2020, and by now has been increased to nearly 5.5 billion. So we see an increase of 70% of the budget, which is great for every one of us who's interested in receiving project funds from LIFE, but also maybe everyone who is interested in climate environmental action in general. It's great to see the European Union finally fund these projects with the sum that they deserve. The LIFE project is divided into two sub-programs. There is the sub-program for environment and sub-program for climate policy. LIFE is the only program that exclusively provides financial support for environmental and nature conservation projects. There is other programs that also have the climate aspect in it quite strongly. So the climate aspect is something that LIFE shares with other European funded programs, but the financial support for environmental and nature conservation is unique to the LIFE program. As one of the viewers had already mentioned a second ago in our little questionnaire, the 2030 agenda. Of course, the 2030 agenda for the European Union is an important topic for everyone talking about climate and environment. And the LIFE program is also the primary program to look at this, see how we can implement it, and work on the policies related to it. that isn't to say that not every program has to do this. In the new funding period 2021 and following for the next 7 years, every single EU funded program has to work on climate action related issues. Meaning also the infrastructural programs like the European Social Fund or the Fund for Regional Development have to pour in a part of their money exclusively to actions that are working on climate change mitigation. But LIFE is the only program focusing on it in this strong of a regard and is the flagship program for all these ideas. The general objective of the LIFE program is to contribute to the implementation, update and further development of these environmental policies and legislations, and to sustainably develop a European community in the environmental sector. The focus of the LIFE program is thus on the implementation and further development of environmental policies, and on the other hand, to contribute concrete ideas to the goals of the EU environmental policy. To this end, self-contained project, so not ongoing project, with a concrete implementation of measures that add value to the environment are funded. The new LIFE program has started in April, which means that since the 29th of April, we're able to request LIFE funding. The first calls for proposals have commenced just right now, last week. 30th of November was the first deadline for LIFE project calls. Everything related to calls we're going to also talk about later in a secondary section of this webinar. Also, we will look into changes further into the webinar, so I'll not only talk about what has changed from the last funding period to this funding period, but I'll try to weave it in a little bit with the general information so that you get the most updated picture on everything so far. Just as a first little idea, though the LIFE program hasn't changed significantly, we have a new sub-program which is called Clean Energy Transition, but besides that it is basically just renaming of activities and project grants that are being funded and a little bit of a shift of focus, and we have a few new details, but we'll look into this a little bit later. Before I go into the different sub-programs and such, I want to show you a little bit how the LIFE program is situated in the whole cosmos of EU-funded projects and EU funding in general. So I'm going to show you a slide which is from our own making. We have developed this to have just a rough structure on how EU funding works, and for everyone who has taken part in one of our webinars has probably seen it. So you will see that the LIFE program will be initially managed centrally in Brussels at the Directorate General for Environment and for Climate, which are situated here. The technical management, so everything from handing out the calls to funds management to contracting, will be done by the executive agency SINEA, which by European standards is very new. It was only funded in April and is often called by the people at SINEA themselves the Green Deal Agency, because every single program that is being managed under the SINEA has something to do or is actively working towards climate change mitigation and in general the goals of the Green Deal, the new Green Deal for Europe. So yeah, this is just to have a rough idea where we are with this. We see the 33 Directorate Generals up here, and we see the two that LIFE is situated in, and we have the executive agencies marked SINEA on the right, which is where our LIFE program is being managed from. Let's jump in a little bit further and look at concrete information. I already introduced the program a little bit to you and told you what it is about, but here you have the direct program objectives once more listed neatly. LIFE is about so many things because it is the only program talking directly about implementation and development of environmental policies. So without wanting to read the whole block of objectives, you see that it is a very diverse program. Generally, it contributes to change towards a resource-efficient, low-carbon and carbon-neutral economy, but it also talks about environmental issues, about biodiversity loss. It has its own network, the so-called Natura 2000, which directly is responsible for trying to prevent biodiversity loss and combating ecosystem degradation. But we're also talking about governance change, we're talking about implementation of new rules in local and regional and national governments. We're talking about also more interaction and dialogue with local stakeholders, with target groups, with civil society, about the topics of the environment and climate. So LIFE does everything related to these topics. This is possible because we do have two sub-programs here. We have the Life Environment sub-program and the Climate Action sub-program. Each of these sub-programs has another sub-sub-program. So we do have nature and biodiversity as well as circular economy and quality of life in the environment sub-program, and we have climate mitigation and adaptation and clean energy transition under the climate action sub-program. The last one that you see here, the clean energy transition, is the newest of these sub-programs. It was recently added at the beginning of this funding period and was not there until end of last year or like beginning of this year. The program that we saw that was kind of related to these issues existed already, but it didn't exist under LIFE. It existed under the Horizon program, which is the research framework program of the European Union. So everything research related is usually under Horizon, and it has transitioned now from there to LIFE to target more specific ideas and have more synergies with the other climate related issues that we're seeing here. LIFE is a program managed on the European level in Brussels, as I mentioned before, which means that if you want to contact the people directly responsible for LIFE, you would need to go to the Director General for Environment, for example. I have written the email address and website here, but because this is a little bit of a hassle, a lot of people are struggling with language barriers, but also the contact is not always available in Brussels. LIFE has started to implement a system of national contact points for the sub-programs. So there are national contact points for nature and biodiversity, for environmental policy and governance, for information and communication, and for climate action. You will find them all under this link here. So go to the website of the executive agency CINEA and check under LIFE and LIFE European countries, and you will find the list of national contact points for your country specific. Basically, every European country by now has a national contact point established for at least one, if not all of these sub-programs, and is able to take care of all the information that you might need. I'm going to check real quick if there's any questions in chat. I don't see any so far, so we'll continue. If you have any questions, please write them in chat already. I might be able to answer them directly, otherwise I'm going to go through them at the end when we're into our Q&A session. So, as I already mentioned, LIFE is a big program with lots of different responsibilities, and it is a comparatively flexible program in terms of project design. When designing a LIFE project, applicants have a relatively large freedom when it comes to choosing how long the program is, the project is going to run, how big the funding is supposed to be, what partners we're going to implement, and so far and so on. Thus, LIFE projects can be very specific and tailored to the context that they needed it. This is intentionally, the people at CINEA have clearly said, and also the executive agencies before that, have clearly said LIFE is supposed to tackle very specific issues, and the European Union is not able to identify which issues directly need to be tackled. in its whole size, all of the European Union. That's why they said most of the program is going to be bottom up. You have an idea, you know what you need, what your environmental sector locally at your spot in the European Union needs, what problems need to be solved, what context there is for this project to exist in. And you are supposed to have the freedom of choice how you want to tackle this program in terms of project duration, project volume, decision for or against certain project partners. The European Union just wants to support you in these and is trying to give you some guidelines. But contrary to other funding instruments, you will not find a very strict and precise formulated call. The calls are more or less open-end and allow for a great variety of project ideas to be submitted. The one thing that I would like to mention is, if you have an idea that is primarily research focused, then LIFE will probably not be the program for you. Everything research related is going to be handled in the former mentioned Horizon program. So research ideas, even if they tackle climate or environmental issues, do have a place in the Horizon program. LIFE projects can include a research component if the research makes a necessary contribution to achieving the LIFE compliant project objectives, but it is not supposed to be the main focus of a LIFE project. One more thing to mention maybe is that LIFE is a program with lots of synergies. So it is not only the one program for the European Green Deal, it is supposed to also help all the other programs that would like to work on this topic on the Green Deal but are not able to within their own statutes and limitations. Therefore, you can expect a lot of projects in LIFE to have synergies with other projects funded in different European programs. That does not mean that you can have the same idea financed by LIFE and another project, another program. That is not supposed to be the case. You can only fund it either here or somewhere else. But it is customary, and the LIFE program is prepared like basically no other European funded program to have multiple smaller programs and projects that are all working together towards a common goal, and you can have multiple sub-projects of your project be financed by other European programs, like for example the Horizon program. This is not usually the case with most European action programs and their funding. They're not based on synergies so much because they have a very clearly defined topic, but with Horizon tackling Green Deal issues and Green Deal issues affecting every single other European funded program, synergies are naturally built in way more than with others. Let's look at the participants. So if you're asking yourself right now, can I even apply for a European funded project with LIFE? I have a first idea. I know roughly what I want to tackle about. Let's look at the list of possible applicants. In order to be eligible, one must be, of course, a legal entity in private or public bodies, be established in one of the countries that either is a EU member state, so one of the 27 that we currently are, or if you are in a non-EU country, you need to be a listed EEA country, or you need to be a country that is either already fully associated to the LIFE program or on its way. The updated list of which country is currently associated with the LIFE program can be found on their list. These on their website. These lists change constantly, so please, before you go ahead with any idea and application, check clearly, is the country that you are applying from or that you want to have in your consortium part of this list of countries eligible. So EU country or EEA country or country associated or on its way to association with the LIFE program. That does not mean that countries that are not on these lists cannot participate at all. There is a sentence in the LIFE program that specifies that other countries can partake, and even there can be actions of your project happening in these other countries. So you can even have countries in, let's say, for example, the continent of Africa participating in your project if they are detrimental to the objectives of the EU part of it. So you have a project idea, for example, with the migration of birds, and the birds naturally migrate from Europe, at least some of them, to Africa. Then you could say in your project it is necessary to also have the countries where the birds migrate through or land in be part of the whole project, even if they are neither a EU country nor an EEA country nor at current moment associated with the LIFE program. But these are exceptions and need to be specified within your application. Important to know is that even if you have countries in your consortium or in your list of actions that are not EU member state, the lead partner must always be established in an EU member state, which means you cannot have a project that is only made out of EEA countries and associated countries. There needs to be at least one European partner, and this one needs to be established in a EU member state. Also, I think that is kind of self-explanatory. All the partners need to be fully registered in a participants register of the European Union. What type of organizations can participate in the program? We see a list of applicants here, or potential applicants: environmental stakeholders, environmental organizations, government structures in the environmental sector, local authorities, and SMEs. So you see that is basically everyone. There's no certain kind of applicant that is specifically not allowed. In general, public and private institutions are allowed too, as well as administrative authorities, non-profits, and non-governmental organizations, so-called NGOs. If you're any of these organizations, you are free to participate in the LIFE program. Out of the experience that we have gathered over the last years, and also the information that we have received from SINEA and the INEA before, the applicants / the beneficiaries are roughly split 1/3, 1/3, 1/3 between NGOs, public authorities or local authorities in the member states, and SMEs. As I can't see any questions so far, I'm going to continue a little bit, and I'm going to introduce to you the different sub-programs. So we do have the sub-program Environment First, which is split into Nature and Biodiversity, as well as Circular Economy and Quality of Life. With these two sub-programs under the program of Environment, it covers basically everything that has to do with nature, biodiversity, and the general idea of environmental protection and the influence of economy on these parts. So the main topics of nature and biodiversity are protection and restoration of European nature, as well as halting and reversing the loss of biodiversity. The main points of circular economy and quality of life are facilitating a transition to a sustainable, circular, pollution-free, energy-efficient and climate-resilient economy. So we do see that there's a vast difference between these two. While this one has a strong focus on environmental issues, nature and biodiversity, this has a way stronger focus on the economy as part of our environment. Because, as we see, the second part here is protect, restore and enhance the environment. So they are still sub-programs focused on environmental issues, otherwise they wouldn't be running under this program here. But the circular economy and quality of life one has a strong focus on economy as part of our environment. Through the nature and biodiversity sub-program, the so-called standard action program projects, which I will introduce to you in a second, are responsible for the development, application and dissemination of best practices in everything related to nature conservation and biodiversity, as well as strategic nature conservation projects. All of this has been supported so far and will be supported in the future. We don't really have a significant change here in these. These projects are intended to promote and advance the implementation of nature conservation laws and EU biodiversity policy goals. So this is the core of every environmental idea in Europe. This is also, by the way, the oldest of the sub-programs. When LIFE was established in 1992, they directly established also the nature program as its sub-program or as the first line, and it has been going on for the full 30 years together by now. What are typical activities that we can find under the nature and biodiversity strand? These are projects supporting nature conservation and restoration. There are projects supporting the Natura 2000 network, species protection, managing alien species, but also topics like ecosystem restoration and much more. The nature and biodiversity part, as I said, hasn't really been changed. We have reinforced priorities, which are the integrated implementation of the prioritized action framework for everyone who has been part of it. This is basically the framework that clearly defines what are the important actions to protect our nature and environment in Europe, as well as the implementation of the biodiversity strategy. This has been reinforced. The only new addition that we see in this sub-program Nature and Biodiversity here is the inclusion of so-called small grants that are specifically for the overseas countries and territories of the European Union. So French Guiana, for example, or St. Martin or other islands that are not part of mainland Europe are supposed to also receive the possibility to fund climate actions, fund environmental actions, nature and biodiversity projects. This has not really been possible so far because LIFE is a very big program with very big projects, usually ranging from 500,000 to 5 million euro per project idea. And most of the time the overseas countries and territories were not able to participate in these ginormous projects. They needed a little bit of a smaller category of financing, and this has been implemented for the first time. So only new addition so far, finance of small grants. To talk a little bit more about the secondary sub-program, Circular Economy and Quality of Life. This is a sub-program that aims to facilitate the transition to a sustainable, circular, pollution-free, energy-efficient, climate-resilient economy, and as I said, protect, restore, enhance the environment itself, either through direct intervention or by supporting the integration of these goals into our policies. The new addition that we have here is that it's not only innovation and demonstration, but also best practice that we're getting financed here. This is an important part because a lot of the times we have seen that there have been project ideas submitted to LIFE where the applicants said, we don't necessarily want to invent new things. We don't want to tackle innovation and demonstration of new ideas, but we want to see if a certain idea that has already been implemented in another part of the EU or somewhere else can be implemented also locally with us and will have a lasting impact. As lots of these projects are also 5 years plus long, the project duration of LIFE projects can be extremely long compared to other action programs. Best practice was always a natural part of it, so we don't only want to test new things, we want to also see if we can implement them somewhere. And this is the new addition. We can by now finance also best practice exchange and knowledge transfer. What kind of activities can we expect from Circular Economy and Quality of Life? The typical ones would be development and testing and demonstrating of new practices, as I said, but by now also exchange of best practice. There are specific kind of project ideas, often relating to solution models and integrated approaches to issues at hand, but this is not necessarily unique to Circular Economy and Quality of Life. This is also something we find in nature and biodiversity. Other ideas for projects are often related to the European Union policy development and implementation of these, or of the improving of existing knowledge bases. A last point, because we do have the point of protect, restore and enhance the environment here, is that lots of projects are focusing on strengthening environmental policy awareness, communication, management and dissemination of environmental policy information, making it so that this is a part where we are able to not only do good but talk about it and get it financed. You want to talk about and get into a dialogue with the civil society about certain environmental policy informations, this is the sub-program for you. So with both of these together, nature and biodiversity as well as circular economy and quality of life, we have basically everything covered that needs to be done concerning environmental topics in the EU. I don't see any questions so far, so I'm going to continue on with the introduction. The sectors that you can expect are, I think, pretty clear. We have basically everything that includes environment, so we have water including the marine environment, we have waste management, we have resource efficiency including soil, forest and green circular economy. Very important sector, as I said, green circular economy, a whole part of the sub-program here. We have environment and health including chemicals and noise, also very important part. Lots of people do think about the LIFE program as primarily focused on biodiversity, and we're taking care of our animals and our plants, and we're bettering our forest situation and stuff like that, but it can also focus on issues of chemicals and noise pollution, for example, because also these are part of the topic quality of life. Last idea of a sector that you could include a LIFE project here is air quality and emissions, including urban and surrounding areas. Also very important modern factor, not only animals and plants, but we're talking also about urban life, urban problems. There is a new European funding program specifically for urban innovations, which will have probably a lot of synergy with the LIFE program here in this regard. So we're going to try to find nature not only in nature but also in our cities as well. Let's look at the other funding program that we have, LIFE Climate Action. LIFE Climate Action is focusing on climate mitigation and adaptation, very important part, and has been an important feature of this program for a while by now, as well as clean energy transition. This is the new sub-program that I talked to you about earlier a little bit. This is the sub-program that was so far part of the Horizon 2020, the new Horizon Europe framework program for research in the European Union, and will now be not doing exactly the same as it did before, but very similar topics, talking about support for the implementation of EU policies concerning clean energy transition. But I'm jumping ahead a little bit. Let's introduce climate mitigation and adaptation first. In this area we have three sub-programs. Again, we have climate change mitigation, climate change adaptation, and governance and information on climate. You can see the abbreviations here, CCM, CCA and GIC. These are very typical. If you want to look into the LIFE program a little bit further and yeah, maybe have your own first application in a while, you will realize that LIFE is using a lot of abbreviations. For example, also SIP and SNAP, and yeah, what all this is, I'm going to talk to you in a second. So we have climate change mitigation, we have climate change adaptation, and we have governance and information on climate. These don't really say a lot what it does, but basically everything that can contribute to a sustainable, energy efficient, renewably energy-based, carbon neutral and resilient economy will be also funded here. We do see that it has quite some overlay with this program here, but the big difference is that here we're focusing specifically on climate related actions, while in the subprogram before we're talking about the same kind of implementation of a resilient and energy efficient and so on economy, but more in the topic of environmental issues. So this is specifically climate related. The activities that one might expect here are development and implementation of policy or management approaches, developing and demonstrating new integrated approaches, and maybe also innovative technologies, innovative systems, methods, development of new tools, new apps, digital solutions, these kind of ideas. Everything that helps us mitigate climate change problems and adapt to climate change. So part of it is also, for example, raising awareness of climate issues, communication, talking to people, spreading information, management and dissemination of climate related topics. Also we have, for example, more efficient compliance with climate protection regulations. A lot of the countries in the EU on a national, regional and local level are still struggling with climate protection regulations. What should be implemented? Is it hurting the economy? Oh no, then we can't do it. No, we should do it. It's important. The European Union has this agenda 2030. We need to adhere to the climate change regulations. So promoting and supporting the more effective compliance is a big part of this subprogram. It has a strong focus on clean energy that we're seeing here. But it is not its only focus, because we do have the sub-program for clean energy. So you can totally have projects related to clean energy also in this part of the climate action program, but please do make sure that it relates to climate change mitigation, adaptation and governance. Otherwise, if it is basically only a clean energy project idea, then it should probably be going to the clean energy transition subprogram. Let's look at it a little bit further. What is the clean energy transition subprogram? This one supports the implementation specifically of EU policies, of the European Green Deal, of the Energy Union with its 2030 targets, the Decarbonization Strategy 2050. These are the ideas that we want primarily implemented through the Clean Energy Transition subprogram. That's why, if we look at the actions and activities that we can do, it is mainly about policy framework support, about technology rollout, digitalization, new services and business models. Everything that helps us implement these strategies in real life, because a strategy itself cannot change the world. We need specific programs, actions, we need people on the ground managing the ideas and putting them into action before we can expect any reasonable change in the European Union. And as far as I'm aware, we are still struggling to be on target for the 2030 targets. There's some countries that are doing better than others. In general, though, we need to accelerate a little bit our efforts to make the 2030 targets happening. Not even talking about the 2050 strategy for decarbonization in the European Union. What is important though is that this is supposed to be policy framework, meaning we're supporting these strategies. We're not supporting innovation in this one here. It is a little bit of an interesting approach to me, because we do want technology rollout, digitalization, new services and business models supported, and at the same time they're specifically saying, please do not invent the wheel anew in this one, but we want you to support what is already there. We want you to coordinate and support certain measures across Europe. We want you to help the transition, but don't invent new project ideas. These ideas that you are supposed to have here, these policy framework technologies, local infrastructure projects, they are supposed to have a high EU added value that overcome market barriers. This is what LIFE has identified as the biggest issue. They're basically saying we would be achieving our environmental and climate energy goals if there wasn't the economy and the market constantly trying to push back. So all of this here is supposed to overcome market barriers that hinder socio-economic transition to sustainable energy. And this typically involves small and medium-sized stakeholders, multiple actors including local and regional public authorities and non-governmental organizations and consumers. So we have a wide spread of beneficiaries in this one. The target groups are very large, but as I said, try to think of project ideas that overcome certain currently in place market barriers to clean energy transition. Checking for questions real quick. Can't see any, so I'm gonna continue for now. No, that was the wrong slide. Continuing for now with our presentation. The sectors that we might find ideas in are the sectors of greenhouse gas emissions, greenhouse gas accounting, land use management practices, forest and cascading use of solid biomass, and operation of the emission trading system. This is for climate mitigation and adaptation, and for clean energy transition we're looking into urban adaptation and land use, infrastructure resilience, sustainable water management, resilience of agriculture, forestry and tourism, and support for the EU's outmost regions. Especially this is an interesting part because the European Union is one of the smallest regions in the world compared to the size of other continents at least, and actually also compared to the size of other countries, we're not even that big. So that means that most of our climate change problems are quite clear to us. We are aware of the problems that are that the people in the Netherlands are facing, and that the people in Italy are facing, that the people in Spain are facing. If there's a drought in Europe, we're all affected by it at the same kind of time. The only exceptions to these are the European outermost regions. So the territories of France and the Netherlands that are way further away from the European Union, that are sometimes, for example, in the Indian Sea or actually in the South American continent. These are not directly located next to us, and we're not really realizing what kind of extreme weather events they have to deal with on a day-by-day basis. They are affected by climate change partially way more, and also the mitigation is not as strong there. This is why this new sub-program introduced the sector of support for EU outermost regions specifically to tackle some of these issues. So, to put it all together, we have a sub-program environment with nature and biodiversity and circular economy and quality of life. This tackles everything environmental related, everything directly related to our plants and animals and biodiversity in general, and our quality of lives as humans in our environment. And we have a climate related sub-program that tackles specific climate change mitigation and adaptation, and also clean energy transition on a market barrier level. These are the two sub-programs, and with these sub-programs most of the topics of the live program will be covered. As I said before, it is a highly synergetic program though, so if you have anything that you would like to see put in place and you cannot find a spot in the live program, then there will probably be a synergy with Horizon, or maybe the new Digital Europe program, or the program for transport that allows you to cover the funds. Let's look at a little bit at the different project types. Here we will see the abbreviations that I mentioned before, and if you ever consider going into the live program, I can only advise you to memorize the few abbreviations that we see quite quickly, because often they will not be written out in application forms and documents. We have as a head category, before I go into the details, action grants, and we have operating grants. I will go into detail with the action grants in a second. That's why I'm going to introduce operating grants for you real quick. Operating grants are not the biggest topic. They are usually what a lot of beneficiaries would like to apply for, but they're not being handed out a lot. There's like, out of the experience that I have with the LIFE program and the information that I've been given, it's roughly 40 operating grants per year, which means that over a time of 6 to 7 years, we're talking about a little bit more than 250 operating grants that had been handed out in the last funding period, compared to the 4,000 projects that have been funded in total over the last years. It's a very, very small amount. If you would like to apply for an operating grant, there is an important difference to the last funding period, which is that operating grants are not handed out anymore on a call basis, which means that you cannot directly apply for an operating grant, but instead you need to enter in a so-called framework partnership with the LIFE program first. Meaning we do have a two-step application here. In the first step, you apply for a partnership with LIFE, and if you do get the partnership, if they sign a contract with you and consider you a partner for the next 3 years, partnership programs run 3 years, then in a second step, you can apply for operating grant funding, which then is only 1 year. So operating grants, two-step process. First, the FPA, the framework partnership agreement, then the operating grants are being handed to you in a one year basis. Operating grants, because I forgot to mention it, and maybe there's someone who's not aware, operating grants support the functioning of non-profit bodies involved in the development, implementation and enforcement of union legislation and policies that are mainly active in the field of environment and climate change, including energy transition, in line with the objectives of the LIFE program, financing their operating costs. So it is not about having a specific project idea. Instead, operating grants are specifically meant to cover the day-by-day costs that your organizations are having if they're working already in the fields of environment, climate change, and energy transition. 70% of your day-by-day costs will be taken over by the LIFE program. No question asked. You don't need to apply constantly again if you have a new project idea. Everything that you do within your organization will be covered up to 70% for 1 year. It is not yet clear how the operating grants are going to be continuing after 2024, because LIFE has been launched officially, but we do not have a work program for the whole duration of the funding period 2021 to 2027. Instead, we do at the moment only have a work program for 2021 to 2024, which is exactly the time frame for our framework partnerships. Maybe afterwards we're going to have a second set of calls for exactly these framework partnerships, and then it's 2025 to 2027, another 3-year duration with 1-year operating grants in between. But we're going to see, we don't know yet too much about it. That's operating grants. As I said, only very specific organizations can even apply for it. You need to be working on a European level already on these kind of policies. Most of us are probably going to be more interested in the so-called action grants, which are going to be handed out to you after a call for proposal has been published. You apply with your project idea to this call for proposal, hand in an idea. The European Union or the CNEA are saying, this is a great idea, we want to support this, and then they're giving you the money for specifically this project only. And there is 5 different categories which we're going to look at now. So in the action grants, there is first and foremost the so-called standard action projects. Standard action projects are what we used to call traditional LIFE projects. So if you have been already, I saw that one person said they had been managing already a LIFE project, maybe you had been applying and managing a traditional LIFE project. Now it would be called standard action projects, SAP, or simply SAP. The main elements of this environment sub-program are best practice projects, demonstration projects, pilots, and information awareness. That basically includes everything. These standard action projects are to develop and test new ideas. They're extremely flexible, the calls are extremely open, there's only a general idea under which category you are supposed to hand in your standard action projects. There is no clearly descriptive call that says you need to now focus on the migration of birds from Sweden to Tanzania. Instead, it is simply that these kind of calls are usually circular economy and waste management. And everyone that has an idea that concerns circular economy and waste management and would like to apply for the standard action project can apply with their specific idea. Which means that they are very flexible to your specific needs, but it also means that you need to think about very clearly what do you actually want to tackle and how is it best done. You identify the problem, you look for a solution, and you decide how your project is going to look. Are you going to do it alone? Are you going to do it together with 10 other partners? Is it going to be big? Is it going to be small? Is it long? Is it short? I often get the question, yeah, but can you give us like rough indicators? Like how much am I supposed to apply for? It is a big difference if I'm applying for 50,000 or 5 million. The live people are specifically saying there is no such thing as a clear idea for a standard action project. Because it is so bottom-up, flexible, coming from your idea, you need to tell them how much money you need. And they will evaluate if it is good value for their money. But if we look at the funded projects of the last 20-30 years, there is a clear indication that I can give you, which is usually they do not fund projects under 500,000 euros. The biggest projects that were funded and that were not exemplary in their ideas were 5 million. So you can guess that a project for a standard action idea should be between 500,000 and 5 million euros. And also looking at best practice projects, there is a rough duration of 3 to 5 years that one needs to follow usually, but projects can be way longer if they want to be. This is something very special about Live, because in basically every other program you will have clear margins how long projects can run. Here they do have these two, but they are set as a limit, as a ceiling so far and high that you will probably never reach them and never use this time. We're going to see this in a second. So what are these best practice projects? Basically apply appropriate, cost-efficient and up-to-date techniques to your specific circumstances of the project and your problem locally. Demonstration projects are used to put into practice, test and evaluate certain measures, methods and approach that are new and not best practice and not known already, not tested already in a certain context. Pilot projects apply techniques or methods that have not been used or tested before anywhere else, so they are a little bit more experimental than the demonstration projects and definitely a lot more experimental than the best practice projects. These are meant to be later applied to similar situations on a way larger scale. So usually you do scale pilot projects in a follow-up project way bigger. So first you apply for a pilot, then you apply for best practice to spread it through the European Union. And then we have information awareness and dissemination projects. Dialogue, communication of your ideas and of European policies. Then we have strategic nature projects and strategic integrated projects. These were called integrated projects for nature and climate before. So they have been split now. We had one project type and now we have two. But basically we had two before because they were already nature and climate actions. Now they're simply split apart. And they're called SNAPs and SIPs. Both have a very similar idea. Both are projects implementing environmental or climate plans or strategies required by specific union environmental or climate legislation, developed from the member states or the European Union themselves. Meaning that your country that you're sitting in has a certain climate plan or a certain environmental plan that you want to tackle. For example, national energy and climate plans, or national energy efficiency action plans, or certain roadmaps how to tackle decarbonization. All of these ideas are pre-made by the country, by the European Union already, or by your local regional government. And you suggest a project that will simply help implement this already existing plan, strategy, roadmap, whatsoever. They do end up having a very large scale, but we're gonna look at this in a second. This simply because they work on these big national plans usually. Then we have technical assistance. Technical assistance is specifically meant to provide support to member states through action grants to enable them to participate more effectively in the LIFE program. Why does that matter? That matters because there is, out of experience, only a certain amount of countries that actually participate in this program or participate in it effectively. A lot of countries, especially in Eastern Europe and in Southeastern Europe, do not really participate and do not have projects in LIFE, and it is environmental issues are not an issue that are only local. They need to apply to us all, and the solutions need to be applied to us all in the European Union. That's why the LIFE program here says we're going to support specifically the countries that are not really partaking. So yeah, it's capacity building for participation in these projects, for example. So here you get funding to be able to later apply for these or for these here more effectively. And it will be like 18 to 19 countries, as far as I'm aware. It's not clear yet which countries are able to be supported through it. But yeah, 18 to 19 out of our 27 countries in the European Union will get support here. And then there's the last categories, the so-called other actions. Other actions are basically all the things that didn't fit in one of the other categories. They are the main element for the clean energy transition. This is the so-called CSA projects, but there's also the small grant facility in the biodiversity program that I introduced to you earlier already for the outmost countries and territories. They are put under this category specifically. Let's look at the general conditions for you. So should you apply, what can you expect? In the standard action project, so basically the bread and butter of LIFE, we find a 60% co-financing rate and up to 75% if your environmental project idea specifically targets certain priority habitat projects. So endangered species and so on will be receiving more funding. Usually you can check with a 60% rate, and there's also one in between the 60 and the 75 with like 67% that are for like medium priority habitat projects. The maximum duration is 10 years, as I said before. 3 to 5 is actually the standard, is usually the case. So projects that, and even longer duration we see with the strategic projects. As I said, implementation of strategies, that is not something that is done from today to tomorrow and then we're done. Implementation of strategy takes time, so the maximum duration here is 14 years. Senior has told me, actually, because I asked him, has there been a project that ran for 14 years, because that would span 2, maybe even 3 funding periods. He said no, the longest integrated project that they could remember was 10 years, but still they wanted to put the limit at a level a little bit higher, so that if someone has a longer idea, they are not hindered by it. Also here you find 60% co-financing for all ideas implementing European strategies. Then for the technical assistance, we see that the co-financing rate goes up. Here we do still have 60% for technical assistance for applying these. And if you want to do some capacity building, then the co-financing goes up to 95%, but then maximum duration in both cases is 5 years. And last but not least, you want to implement another action. So you want to implement what we saw here already as either the small grant facility, or you want to implement a CSA project. For the small grants, you will always have up to 100,000 with 95 to 100% co-financing. extremely valuable financing, but small amounts. As I said before, most live projects are 500,000 plus. While if you want to have a CSA project in this new climate transition, clean energy transition subprogram, then you will be getting 95% co-financing and short projects of 1.5 to 3 years. This is the financing we can apply, and I mentioned it to you earlier already. Most of the live program is bottom up, meaning we're having very open calls, no clear idea what you should be doing. This has changed a little bit. This is why I'm mentioning it. There is specifically the CSAs that are going to be top down, meaning the CSAs are going to be having a clearly defined call. So they're going to be saying, we need you to work on a project idea related to clean energy transition, overcoming a certain market in a certain country with a certain current problem. And then you can present your solutions as project applications. This is the only part of live though that is top down. So the European Union demands from you a certain project idea. All of the rest is bottom up, where you can clearly define what you would like to tackle. Checking for questions real quick, and I see none, so I'm going to continue for now. I do see that we're quite far already in the webinar. We have managed to pass the first hour, so I'm going to try to be quick and give you enough time for questions. So if you do have some questions already, please start thinking about them already now, and we're gonna have time for Q&A in a bit. Wanted to talk to you real quick about certain award criteria. Because the first calls are now officially closed since last week, we do have an idea now how the European Union is judging your project ideas and their applications. And we do see that for all the one stage or single stage applications, which are basically all the standard action projects, for example, we do have 4 criteria: relevance, quality, impact, and resources. They will be each be receiving 20 points, with impact being weighted 1.5 times, so ending up with 30, and there's 10 possible bonus points. That's an interesting system because they're basically saying we do value all of these things at the same time. We value the relevance of your project idea. We value the quality of it. We value how impactful it will be and what kind of resources it will be used. So also, for example, partially how expensive is your project idea. But then we're weighting them a little bit different, and we're adding bonus points. These bonus points are a very unique system to the live program that is in this kind of format not implemented in most other programs, where you get you get always 2 points if the European Union judges that one of the bonuses is applied to your project idea. So if you have synergies between live subprograms, you get 2 points extra. If you don't, you get 0. If you use in your project areas with specific needs and vulnerabilities, or apply your project to the outermost regions, you get 2 points, otherwise 0. Meaning a project idea that does not have any of this here will be able to reach up to 90 points, not a single point more, even if you get 4 points in all of these others. While if you have all of these applied, you can still of course fail if you don't get enough points in the individual categories. For all the SIPs and SNAPs, you do remember the integrated projects, we have a 2-stage process, so not a single stage application, but 2, where first you have to hand in a concept note, and then if your concept note is accepted, you are being introduced to the second round of proposals, where then you need to introduce your full proposal. This full proposal will be judged on the same kind of 4 criteria as up here, with a 5th category added, which is complementary funding. So you are supposed to make sure that for the SIPs and SNAPs that we saw here, you're not only receiving European funding, but also national or regional funding, simply because you are working on national/regional policies, strategies, and roadmaps. So if you're working on the national national plan for energy efficiency or energy efficiency action plan, then it is logical that your national government would partially support this project and give you some co-funding, and this is what is being represented here. So if you don't have any co-funding, you will not get the 20 points here. What changed between the single and the double stage is simply that the impact is not weighted any stronger any longer, which is why we have the complementary funding instead, and we have no bonus point system. So for action plans, implementation of policies and such, you cannot get extra points for these interesting ideas, for example, synergies. So if you want to now apply, you heard what I had to say, you thought this is an idea, I can totally see myself implementing a European funded project under the LIFE. Under which conditions? For example, you're saying, I really don't know, am I supposed to give my project a 500,000 euro budget, 1 million or 5 million? Check out the projects already funded in this best practice database to understand better how big of a budget did these projects that have similar ideas to what you're going to do had in the past. If you want to look now at the open calls, visit the Funding and Tenders Opportunity platform. This is the only platform where all live calls will be presented at the same time. You have a little button here to get directly to live and its calls, or you go to the search mask and you insert the search criteria, current program period, and then program for the environment and climate action live. And you will be presented with, at the moment, 34 calls, but you can also see that not all of them are open. 15 have closed already and 19 are currently open for submission. You can check their names here and you can check the deadlines, and you can see that there's actually already calls that have a deadline next month that opened already a few months ago, summer this year, but there's actually even calls for later this year already open under these 19. So enough time to prepare a consortium if you have any ideas, but you feel like the 2 weeks will not be enough, don't worry. In general, by the way, live calls are supposed to be set once a year, meaning if you missed the deadline of the 30th of November literally right now last week, and you say I would like to have applied for one of these calls, then don't worry, you can start building your consortium right now and rely on the information. Next year around the same time there will be another opening for these calls, and you can start your application now and hand it in as soon as the call opens, roughly beginning of summer next year. Yeah, so this is what I wanted to introduce to you. This is the live program. This is a rough overview. Of course, we don't have enough time to go into big details, but so far these are the first ideas. I would like to now switch over to a Q&A session. So I'm going to be here for your questions. Ask me about the different sub-programs, about funding opportunities, and so on. We can try to see if we can answer your questions together. But maybe also the people in chat will want to give you their experience. As I saw by now, actually even multiple people have said that they have experience funding European projects. So I'm gonna go to the chat section. I can see that the stream is not going well for a while now. I'm sorry that I can't really do anything about that really. I can try to restart the stream, but that would probably not yield the best results. I'm gonna see if I can improve my latency, but I don't think that's possible while I'm streaming. Is there any questions right now from you that you would like to ask? Okay, so while you may be thinking about your questions, I'm going to try to improve the stream quality real quick. but my upload rate is fine. It needs to be somewhere in the connection between here in the office and YouTube, so I can't really change anything about that right now. Okay, I don't see any questions in the chat. If there's no one who would like to ask something, I can also go back real quick and introduce to you one or two project ideas. So I have two best practice projects that ran through live in the last funding period that I could introduce to you right now, just so that you maybe get a better idea of what is being funded and how this in the end looks. If you have any questions though, put them in the chat. I have it open here and I'm going to be able to look at it at any given point. So the first project I would like to introduce to you is the project Live Aurinia. It's in the title, it is a live project. By the way, as a little fun fact, this is mandatory. For every single project that wants to receive live funding, in your project acronym, you need to have the word live. We see it, it jumped twice. You see it also here for the second project that I want to introduce to you. It also says live agri adapt. It is simply mandatory. I don't know why this is the only European program where this is a mandatory restriction. But if you don't have live in your acronym, they're simply going to put it in front of it. Otherwise, you cannot receive live funding. So this project idea wanted to support the restoration of the last two known habitats of a certain butterfly. Doesn't sound like something that is usually supported by big money, but in this case, as we can see, this project received a 3.4 million euro funding. Also interesting to note, there is only one partner in the consortium. So this is the partner that, or this is the organization that applied for the funding, and they got it and they don't need to share it with anyone. This is very specific to live. Most other funding programs either don't hand out budgets of 3.4 million, or they will force you to have at least 3, 5, 10 partners in your consortium that you share this money with. In this case, it is a 8-year running project with 3.4 million euro budget, with only one organization that is taking care of the ideas. When the Live Aurinia project started in 2010, insect mortality was far from being the talk of the town, but the specific butterfly that we're talking about here, the golden fritillary butterfly, was already extinct in the north of Europe. Once lost, it is difficult to recover certain butterfly species because it is, or at least was at this point, unknown if the breeding and increasing of numbers of butterflies on such a large scale would even work. It was completely untested to this point, and that is also the unique selling point of this project idea: breeding of butterflies on a large scale. The project team of the Schleswig-Holstein Foundation for Nature Conservation tried it out anyway, received 8-year funding, and has by now successfully implemented this project. Many habitats such as the heaths, rough grasslands, wet meadows were improved and restored throughout the process. So we're not only talking about taking a butterfly and trying to make them procreate and receive another butterfly out of it, but no, it is talking specifically about improvement of the natural habitats of these butterflies to allow them to breed there again naturally and reproduce diligently. So there were two phases. First phase is simply that these areas needed to be improved and restored. And the second part was that a certain amount of butterflies that was captured in a region where they still existed was released there, and it was checked under which conditions do they reproduce, and then in a basically going back to the first stage, the habitats were adjusted again. We checked what worked best, and went back then, releasing more butterflies, seeing if they can be reintroduced and if they procreate. Yeah, that is an interesting idea. As you see, the results were that we had new habitats introduced, but not only for this butterfly, but for 30 other species. So at the end of the project, they did check what improvement in the habitats were in general noted, not only concerning to the butterfly, and found that 30 other species were reintroduced that had previously been lost. Also, as you see, large amounts of new arnica and certain plants were introduced. We have lectures, guided tours and festivals that were being partaken. So this is the part where I said you need to not only do good, but you need to talk about it, you need to spread the word and make sure that everyone is aware of what you did for the environment, for the nature, for the biodiversity in Europe. By now they even established excursion destinations, so tourists can come and check out the results of the whole project. And yeah, the butterfly is now only the little snowball that introduced the avalanche to this whole improvement of habitats. But it is the idea that brings tourists back into this region. Checking real quick if the stream quality has improved, but I can't really see it right now. I can also see that the viewers are dropping. I'm gonna restart it real quick. Give me a second. It does not seem to improve anymore.